Good morning and welcome to Adults Select Committee. Those of us in the room will very shortly identify ourselves, and then we will go to the agenda, beginning with any apologies for absence. So to start with, I would be very grateful if members and guests would identify themselves as we go round. So would you like to start, Roger?
I'm Councillor Roger Harris, Vice Chair of the Adult Select Committee.
Paula Harris, Democratic Services.
Shirley Lightbound, Chief Officer, Monmouthshire County Citizens Advice.
Doesn't the light up? Good morning, my name is Darren Williams. I'm the Better Advice, Better Lives project worker for Citizens Advice.
Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health.
Morning, I'm Councillor Penny Jones, Member of Adult Select.
Good morning all, County Councillor Ruth Edwards, elected member for Lentilio Cresceni, and I'm also a member of the Adults Committee.
Good morning, Councillor Martin Hickman, member of this committee.
Ralph Chapman, member of this committee.
David Hill, co-opted member from Action 50 Plus Monmouth.
County Councillor Paul Jordan, Councillor Ford Abergavenny, and also Vice Chairman of the Council.
Councillor Val Smith, Llanbaddock Ward, Observing Chairman.
And Councillor Peter Farley, St Mary's Ward, Chepstow, and Chair of the committee. Nice, slick passing, worthy of a team that did rather well last night, methinks. Are there any apologies for absence, please, Paula?
Thank you, Chair. I've not received any apologies for this meeting this morning.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? And before we go any further, I certainly will have one. Are there any others? As and when, I will declare mine now because it relates to item 4, and I've taken advice from the monitoring officer on this one. I do have an interest in item 4 as one of the 2 elected members from the County Council who attend the board meetings of Monmouthshire Citizens Advice. We are not, the other is Councillor Murphy. We're not voting members, we are observers, but the advice I have received is that I should declare a personal and non-prejudicial interest, and that I will do as soon as a form comes my way. The next item on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on Tuesday, the 17th of May. That's these ones, isn't it? So can we go through for accuracy, please? Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. And page 4. No matters of accuracy. Everybody content with those minutes? Thank you very much. That was the carers meeting. It was a good meeting, I think. That's all the minutes, isn't it, that we need to pay attention to. Thank you very much. Now, it's a great pleasure to welcome Shirley and Darren. In her current incarnation as Chief Officer of Monmouthshire Citizens Advice Bureau, Shirley has led the work to bring a single organisation together for Monmouthshire from what were previously 4 separate bureaus. And I've known Shirley through that work over the years, from the time when I was involved with the then separate bureau in Chepstow. But it's a great pleasure to welcome Shirley. And I know you've been to the Chamber before, but you haven't been to one of these meetings before, have you? No. And also a welcome to Darren, whose paper to the board really, to the Citizens Advice Bureau board, inspired the suggestion that these might be matters that that this committee and other councillors in turn might want to hear about. So welcome to you both. We look forward to what you've got to say. Is there any chance we can have a presentation, Paula, or not?
Is it just the 4 pages that you sent us that we've attached to the agenda?
But it's not.
I think Hazel may have a copy.
Yes,
of the
it's a bit of a glitch, and we do apologise to you for that. Okay, Shirley, when you're ready then. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Peter, and thank you very much for inviting us here this morning. I hope you find what we have to say interesting, and we're obviously very happy to take questions. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of basically the Citizens Advice Service. Nationally, people think of us as being a big national organisation, which we are, but we are members of that national organisation. There are 316 local organisations which make up Citizens Advice nationally, and we are all independent charities. We deliver services across England and Wales by over 2,600 locations and by telephone, web chat and face-to-face. We also include the Pension Wise service and the witness service functions. Nationally, there's 7,000 staff, 6,500 in the network, and 22,000 volunteers. In Monmouthshire, we have 4 offices, one in each of Abergavenny, Caldecott, Chepstow and Monmouth. And we have 10 paid staff and about 82 volunteers. We run a service which covers 5 days a week over the 4 offices, but none of the offices are open 5 days a week. All of them are open 4 days a week. But we do manage that both in the north of the county, Monmouth and Abergavenny, and in the south, which Chepstow and Caldecott, there's a service on every day of the week. And we also provide the telephone service as part of the National Advice Line, which is available to our clients from 9 until 4, 5 days a week, all year round. Along with myself as the chief officer, I have an office manager and 2 advice services managers, one for the north and one for the south. And then we have the project workers like Darren who provide our specialist casework. Specialist casework includes in-depth advice and support with applications for benefits and appeals against refusals and overpayments. And we also do tribunal representations for clients where we can, where resources allow. Our annual budget, which we set for 16-17, allows for an income of approximately £180,000. But it is a deficit budget because our expenditure comes out of £195,000. We are contracted to Monmouthshire County Council over a 3-year period to provide advice services in the county. And for that, this year, because the contract allowed for a 10% year-on-year reduction in the payment, this year we will get £57,000 from Monmouthshire County Council. The rest of our funding comes mainly from town and community council funding, and obviously we do as much fundraising as we can, and we accept donations where people are very kind enough to give them to us. We are also paid by the Welsh Government for providing the Better Advice, Better Lives project, which is the one that Darren is going to talk to you about. We have a rolling year-on-year contract with them. There was talk last year of them ending that contract, but fortunately the Welsh Government received a very good report of how successful the Better Advice, Better Lives project was, and they agreed to continue funding for at least this next year. What will happen in 17-18, I'm afraid I really don't know. We, as I say, we provide telephone advice and specialist advice. We provide any client who comes to us will initially receive on the telephone or face-to-face, initially receive a short 10 to 15 minute sort of assessment interview of what their needs are, and they will then either be signposted to another organisation, given information and advice which we can give simply in that short period of time, or they're given an appointment to come back and see us at a further time, or if we can do it, we'll give them an appointment to see a full advisor straight away. In 2015-16, we saw a total of 2,747 unique clients. That is, a client is only counted once as a unique client, even though we might see them many more times than once. That covers a total of 6,391 different issues. Benefits make up the largest part of our issues, and that's 2,179. Debt is 1,389, and then housing, employment, relationships and families all around 400, 500. But there's obviously a lot of miscellaneous things, clients that come in with rather odd requests on occasions, but things that we can usually deal with one way or another. We also have outreach in Usk and in Wisham, and we do the Better Advice, Better Life project has an outreach at the Adult Community Education Centre in Abergavenny, and the health part of the project does outreach at Chepstow Community Hospital and at some doctors' surgeries in the county. All our staff and volunteers are trained to Generous Advice Standard. It takes about 6 months to train an advisor, and they also receive regular monthly training meetings to keep up to date on the innumerable changes that there are in the systems. Our specialists are obviously trained to a higher level, and we encourage all of our volunteers to explore opportunities for training and moving on. Training is provided both in-house and by outside agencies like National Citizens Advice, GAVO, and the CPAG. And that's, I think, the end of my presentation. So at that point, if you've got any questions on the Generous service, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Darren, who will talk specifically about his project, which is the Better Advice, Better Lives project.
Thank you, Shirley. Do members have any questions at this stage? Councillor Jones, Penny Jones.
It isn't actually a question, it's a request. I wonder if we could have a copy of this, please, sent to us. It would be, if you could send it to,
Yes.
Bella, and then.
Okay.
All right. Would that be all right?
Yes,
Thank you
fine.
very much.
Thank you, Chair. You were saying, you've got a £15,000 deficit in what you get and what you spend. How can you possibly manage that?
Last year, we also set a deficit budget, and we actually ended up at the end of the year with a very small surplus. We worked very hard on attracting funding, extra funding, and we're working all the time on talking to the community councils, particularly who don't give money to us at the moment. And I'm very happy to go and talk to any of those community councils and give them the figures of how many of their clients we see, what it costs us to deliver that service, so that we can encourage more donations and grants in that way. We also work very hard on fundraising activities.
Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to certainly the three offices, Abergavenny, Monmouth and Chepstow, they're very close to borders of other counties. Are we able to analyse the usage of the services in those three centres from people outside Monmouthshire?
Yeah, we can provide those statistics. It's not as easy as providing our own, but we can provide those statistics, and we have always sort of happily seen clients from over the border. The premise of Citizens Advice is that we are available to all, so we will do that. And obviously with our telephone service, because it's a Wales-wide telephone service, we end up answering telephone calls for places all over Wales. However, we get a net benefit to that because more of our clients actually receive a telephone service than we answer telephone calls for other people. So it's to our advantage to be involved in these things.
I thought you might have had a supplementary there about the cross-border flow.
the supplemental question is, presumably we don't get any contribution from any authorities outside Monmouthshire.
We don't get contributions from the county councils, but we do get contributions, for instance, in Chepstow from Tiddenham Parish Council. And the Paws Allotment, which is a charity on that side of the border, also give us a small grant every year.
From memory, that is a long-running issue. I won't go there at the moment, but suffice to say, that's the southern end. There will be similar cross-border issues for the Monmouth Bureau, presumably.
Wearing my hat as an Abergavenny Town Councillor, we make a significant contribution to the CAB in Abergavenny, but I believe that so far as community councils are concerned, there are a number of community councils who make no contribution whatsoever. Is there anything that you can do to encourage the community councils to make contribution?
We have recently been able to produce statistical information which breaks it down, breaks our client counts down into wards. And though we've always every year written to all the community councils requesting that they support us, as you say, we don't get supported by all of them. We're hoping that with the new statistical information that we have, that we can actually explain to them how many of their clients we're seeing and what it's actually costing us as an organisation to see those clients on a client cost per head, point, and hoping that that will encourage them to provide grant funding in the future.
Councillor Penny-Jones and then David Hill, please.
So what will happen? Will you approach these community councils and then offer to give them a presentation or whatever? So the ball's in your court, is it? Thank you.
Could you just explain to me what you mean by outreach exactly?
An outreach is opening hours for probably half a day a week at a premises which we rent or we get. Sometimes we're very lucky and we're given them gratis, but it's a very short period of time. So, for instance, in Usk, we do an outreach at the hub in Usk for one morning a week. So it's a short sort of advice period where we provide the advisors and laptops for them to work with, and clients are able to come in and see them as they need.
If everybody's happy at this point, can I suggest we move to the next part of the contribution from our witnesses? Obviously, at the end, we can return to the general as well as the specific if you wish, because I'm sure there's all sorts of other points that we might want to raise. But if you're happy, Shirley, that you've said what you needed to say at this point, and people are obviously satisfied with their answers, can we invite Darren to take us into his part of the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name's Darren Williams, and through Citizens Advice, I run a project for Better Advice, Better Lives. As you're no doubt aware, in 2012, the government announced massive plans for reforms in the welfare benefits that people would get. Specifically, the Welsh Assembly set up a project through Better Advice, Better Health in the CAB to try and combat the changes that were coming in. And what they were looking at was changes to housing benefit, which meant that any over-occupancy would mean a person's benefit was reduced by either 14% or 25%. And there were changes to the council tax benefit at that time that meant that everybody was going to have to put a contribution forward. There was public outcry, there was an awful lot of problems. So the Welsh Assembly set up a project. My role is to ensure that the people of Monmouthshire have maximised their income through the appropriate take-up of benefit. That also includes discretionary housing payments that can cover any shortfalls that people have. It's not as widely known as, say, housing benefit or council tax reduction because I don't know, people just don't know about it. So part of our role is to make sure that everybody has access to that and has any additional funding that they need. Yeah, we have funding of about £38,000 a year. I'm required to see 200 clients and to secure them a benefit gain of around £200,000. At present, I see approximately 275 new clients, and that's based throughout Monmouthshire, so I do apologise. I thought that was off. I cover the full bureau in Monmouthshire, so I'm Monmouth, Abergavenny, Caldecott, Chepstow. I also do outreach locations in Abergavenny, and I'm looking at other outreaches throughout the borough to try and extend the service as much as I can. One of the reasons that the project is perfectly placed at the moment is because we don't just deal with the housing benefit and the council tax reduction. For the ease of a client, it became apparent that we needed to extend it to cover all benefit issues that they may have. We're also ideally placed to cover issues such as debt advice, because often the income, the debt, it all goes hand in hand. So we're there to help with that. Day to day, I assist clients by establishing the benefit entitlement, checking their existing entitlements to make sure they're correct, because you would be surprised how many times they're not. Assisting with any applications or dispute resolution, and generally doing the best we can to help those clients. We also then, if there are debt issues, we can pass that to my colleagues in the bureau, who can then look at reducing those debts for clients. So again, it helps to maximise their income. The future of the project, as Shirley mentioned, we are Welsh Assembly funded. Initially, the project was for 3 years, and then it went on a year-by-year basis. But last year, they initiated a rather in-depth report by a research company called ARAD, just to see if the project as a whole throughout Wales was financially viable and if it was worth the amount of money that they have put into the project. Pleased to say that that report was very, very positive. In the notes that I sent, which I'm sure could be sent to you as well, there is a link to ARAD's full report if you have several hours spare and you wish to read it. It will take a little bit of time, but I think that highlights everything that's going on in Wales itself. The future from funding is undecided. Even after the report, Welsh Assembly is still only going to give a year-on-year grant. The changes to the benefit system continue, and we are starting to see a lot more clients with a lot more problems, mainly because Universal Credit has hit the area, and Universal Credit has brought with it a whole bag of problems that we didn't have to face before. We have prepared for that for some time and are continuing to train as changes are made to that benefit, because it's causing a lot of people a lot of stress, a lot of problems, and ending up in an awful lot of debt. We were given to understand, and I've been asked just to mention it, that Monmouthshire Council currently has a similar project, as do local housing associations. We were informed that the funding for the Monmouthshire Council project was £100,000 a year with a footfall of 100 clients. Pleased to say that for considerably less, we see considerably more. One of the great advantages that Citizens Advice has in that area is that we are completely independent from any organisation or landlord, social landlord and things like that, which clients seem to appreciate a lot more. Monmouthshire Housing Association's project has fallen rather short because clients do not want to discuss any rent issues, financial issues, debt issues with their landlord, because they really do feel that's going to have a detrimental effect on them. Being completely independent, we can assist them with that, and it's better for them. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. It's for the clients. So whether in the future we could join up, or perhaps arrange something between ourselves to spread the service further throughout Monmouthshire, would be really good for the benefit of the clients. But I'm sure that's something that would be discussed at a later date. And so we'll just continue.
Darren, thank you. I think you've. I think the later date might be almost immediately, for good reason. Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. You may or may not be able to answer this question. Since the introduction of the new rules in 2012, in your experience, have you actually come across anybody who has moved from a larger house to a smaller house in order to avoid the additional supplemental charges?
When you say moved, do you mean voluntarily moved or being forced to move? Because a lot of my clients...
I didn't say either, I just said moved.
Yes, we come across a lot of clients that are in that situation, but the biggest problem that they have is that smaller properties just aren't available. And so what are they to do? Yes, they can claim discretionary housing payments, but I mean, that's not a long-term solution. As you know, that the way that they work is at most 6 months, and then yes, you can reapply, but it will get less and less. And as an encouragement to find smaller accommodation, that's a wonderful thing, but there isn't smaller accommodation. There's not enough of it being built. We've also had several clients who have, in effect, lost their homes because they just can't afford it. And when situations change, especially for clients who have lived in a property for 30 years, but the children have now moved out, they can't find places to go either because there is a shortage of the housing or the areas that they are going to are foreign to them. Asking someone to move from Monmouth to Chepstow, it's just not practical, and it's really not fair on that person to have to do that. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are affected by that.
Do you want to come back?
But you can't, yeah, in ballpark figures, how numbers?
I don't keep specific statistics on it. I have got a record of everybody, and I can dig that out for you. But I would say approximately within that time period when it first started throughout the country, I would say a good 30% of my clients were affected by that issue. But they were clients that weren't, they were ones that were specifically looking to try and find somewhere else to live, not specifically ones who just claimed the discretionary housing payment and struggled to make the shortfall. But I can send those figures to you, if that's of help.
It would be of interest, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Darren, I'm interested in exploring the parallel projects that you've talked about, and you talk about here Monmouthshire Council, and then you mentioned Monmouthshire Housing Association. Is it the Housing Association that is doing the parallel, or is it Monmouthshire with Monmouthshire Housing with the county council?
As far as I'm aware, they're both doing it. Monmouthshire Housing Association has its own project set up. Monmouthshire Council has a project set up.
I really think this is something to be explored and should be passed up the management within the council, because, you know, I'm not doubting what you're saying, but obviously if you're correct, you're doing a far better job, if you know what I mean. You're seeing more people, you're getting more bangs for the bucks, and if that expertise obviously gets passed on, we're going to increase the number of people we see and increase the number of results. We need somehow, and I'm sure it can be explored, to make sure that you and Monmouthshire Housing and relevant county council officers can get together for best practice.
One of the issues with that is that I get a lot of referrals from both of those projects, because specifically they deal with housing benefit and council tax reduction. So that when a person goes to them and says, I'm in financial difficulty, I've lost my job, what can I claim? They only look at those two benefits. Now we are ideally placed because I look at all benefits.
Yeah.
And also we address their issues of any debts. Because if you take a person who has just lost their job and they have an average credit card bill, they have bills that are outside of someone who has been long-term on the benefit system, then they really just don't know what to do. And So we're ideally placed for that, and we get referrals for that regularly.
Do Monmouthshire Housing and the County Council actually refer people that they can't help? They've come to a halt. Do they actually refer to you, or do they say, sorry, you know, this is as far as we can go?
No, they do refer to us, but generally it's not an official referral. They just tell people go down the citizens' advice.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Darren made a point here of the devastating effect of this reforms with the housing tax. You know, he referred of someone living in a home for 30 years. And it is a home. It's not a council house. It's not a social housing property. It's their home. And it's devastating when you've brought up a family and really been forced to move, if you can move. And I think there's not one person in this chamber would not agree that this is a terrible piece of legislation.
Councillor Chapman, are there any other questions? Councillor Jordan, I think Ty wants to say something as well, which is fine.
Oh, no, it just seems to me that there's a significant synergy between the three organisations who is all doing the similar or same job. Perhaps at the next meeting we could have the appropriate officer come to explain to us what they foresee for the future in being able to streamline this sort of service.
To take that at this stage as a recommendation. Councillor Edwards? Sorry.
I think there's great confusion about the general public who, after the war, a lot of them then had council housing. And a lot of those now are quite elderly. They've brought up their families, and so yes, as we say, that is their home. But a lot of them are still confused, thinking that it's a council house. And with the title of Monmouthshire Housing, there is still an awful lot of confusion out there, and I don't think that is helping their situation as to when they get into difficulty.
Thank you for that. Did you want to help us to understand some of this?
Yeah, it's just offering maybe some direction of travel with this. With the parallel project you were mentioning with Monmouthshire taking forward, would that be the financial inclusion project? By any chance, would that ring a bell? Is something that might sit in partnerships with Will McLean? Is just to try and direct you in the right direction with an appropriate officer within the council. Because I know within my remit in social care and health, we have benefits advisors, but that's looking at benefit entitlement and the kind of things you look at. But then where we get out of our depth, we do refer them to people like Citizens Advice. But we are aware of the financial inclusion project that is run through our partnership section, so that could be a direction for looking at appropriate officer within Monmouthshire County Council.
That's very helpful. I think for the moment, the suggestion on the table, inspired by Councillor Jordan's questions, is that we invite early appropriate officers, and it sounds as though that is in the partnerships part of the council, to try and get some clarity here. I think in fairness to a number of people, both in the room and outside of it, Darren's been very clear from the beginning that there isn't a complete clarity about what these other roles are, or even if they exist in the form in which we've been speaking. But what we have done is highlighted a considerable area of overlap, uncertainty, potential confusion. And it also reminds me that for some time now, we've been wanting to bring Monmouthshire Housing into the committee, who remain in many ways elusive to us. So there's a whole cluster of things here that we could usefully explore as a committee. So shall we take it that that will be one of our recommendations? And I wonder then if we could delve a little more into some of this, because I don't know, Shirley, whether you're the best person to answer this. You may well be, but Darren, of course, will have a contribution as well, perhaps. something tells me that people working in this area with clients, i.e. our residents, not only need to be impartial and all of those things, they also need to be suitably qualified, trained, audited, all those issues about the quality of any service. Could you tell us a bit about where Citizens Advice stands on this? Because it would be interesting to be able to ask the same question subsequently to some of the others that we've mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. As members of the National Citizens Organisation, we are subject to audit of our quality of advice. Previously to the last 12 months, we were audited once every 3 years on our quality of advice. 12 months ago, that system changed, and we are now part of an ongoing self-assessment process in which we do a random selection of our case records, and in-house we assess them against what is called the Common Assessment Tool, the CAT, and we then submit them to the audit team at Citizens Advice, and they then do a comparator against our assessments, and we are graded on 2 KPIs, the first one being the amount of our cases who actually are of good quality, and the second one on being the agreement of the assessment of our in-house assessors against the Citizens Advice audit team assessment. We are at the moment green in both those KPIs and have been for the last 3 quarters of the year, and we would hope to continue that. Personally, I think it's a much better assessment and audit process because it's continuous, and we're not waiting for an assessment in 3 years' time to be told that, yes, our quality of advice has dipped from where it was last time, and what are we going to do about it? This way we can keep a constant watch on the quality of advice, and we are doing that, and it's part of our membership requirement for Citizens Advice to do that.
Thank you very much. So that brings us back again to some of the earlier points, that this is a largely voluntary organisation. The paid staff essentially provide the sort of infrastructure and the supervision, but the bulk of the work, with the exception of specific projects that we're talking about as well, bulk of the work is done by volunteers. So when we look at CAB in the county, we not only, I think, need to think about what they are doing for our citizens and with our citizens, but they're also providing a tremendous range of volunteering opportunities for people with them as well. And has anybody got any more questions before I go rambling into the ones I'd like to ask? Councillor Penny-Jones.
Yes, I'd just like to, you have such a large number of volunteers. I just wonder about safeguarding issues and training. What happens about that? Because it is such an important part of any committee or any business.
We have a very regimented, I should say, training and recruitment process. So we go through, every volunteer who expresses an interest in volunteering with the organisation goes through a recruitment process. We take up references and we also interview them. And if they're accepted as a volunteer, they then go through an induction process and start their training processes. One of my advice services managers takes the lead on training, and all of us sort of cover parts of the training in one way or another. And we obviously refer anyone for specialist training outside our offices in Monmouthshire. All our volunteers also do 3 days of training with Citizens Advice before they are signed off as competent generalist advisors. As I say, it takes about 6 months to get to that stage, in which time they will be very carefully observed. They do a lot of observations themselves in the early stages of other advisors working, but we do try and get them in front of clients, sort of actually being proactive, by going through as assessors for the gateway assessment process sooner than the 6 months, because it seems unfair to have someone who has volunteered to help with the public to be sat in an office all the time with a piece of paper rather than actually being able to see the clients. So the gateway assessment process allows us to get advisors in front of clients more quickly. But they are very carefully observed. There's always a supervisor on duty whenever they're seeing a client. And they are encouraged to remove themselves from the interview room with the client and go to talk over with the supervisor the issues that the client has come with and what next steps they're going to take with that client. So we are very carefully regimented as far as that's concerned.
What about DBS? Do they have to have a DBS check?
Certain of our caseworkers and supervisors do. We don't request it for all volunteers because they are under supervision all the time.
Does that help? And very timely to be able to ask that question, because these are issues that we were talking about only yesterday in this chamber. Are there any other questions from members before I mount my hobby horse and ride it for a bit? Thank you. I'm very interested in some of the things that are in the paper, not only in the context of our meeting this morning, but thinking more widely. For example, I'm looking at the two-line paragraph in Darren's report. Since the project was set up in 2012, you say, I've seen over 800 new clients and helped maximise their income by over £1.5 million. That strikes me as being a rather handsome ratio, really, as between cost and benefit, if you want to look at it like that. And I'm sure you could look at it in other ways. But we've also touched on, and in answers to some of the questions, particularly, if I might say, from responses to Councillor Jordan's questions, but others as well, we have begun to get something of a picture of aspects of life in Monmouthshire. Not necessarily a wholly rosy picture, but a picture of life for a good number of our residents. I don't know, it's a question or a concern. My question, I think, to you to start with, but maybe to all of us as well, how can we get this better known? So it strikes me that CAB has access to some fairly unique insights in the round into the problems being faced by our residents that we ought to know about, if you like, from the social policy point of view. We are responsible as a council for providing services of various sorts. We need to have a better understanding of the needs that those services have to meet, or at the very least be aware of. And I'm just wondering how we can, as it were, maximise the value of CAB's work in this context, how we can make some of these things better known to councillors. I mean, I doubt if before you read this report, many of us, and I would include myself, would have realised that, for example, the kind of saving that Darren was describing was being made and being made over time. So I'm sort of floating a question. How can we as councillors, bearing in mind that we are one of the supporters of CAB, but not the only one, how can we as a council maximise even more what we do in terms of getting insights into the needs of our population? Is it, for example, through annual reports, or could it be through specific briefings on particular issues? I don't know, but my sense is that there's something very important here that we wouldn't otherwise know about.
Sorry. We already provide the council under our contract with some statistical information about the number of clients that we see and the areas of the issues that we see them in. We provide them with what we call our dashboard, which is a document that's produced by Citizens Advice nationally on a county-wide basis. So we provide that already to the council, along with a narrative of what we are doing on a sort of more general way. I admit we don't at this point in time actually report actively on our research and campaigns work, which is the social policy side of the business, but I'm sure that we could improve that, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I thank you for that. I wasn't necessarily I think it's an all-round improvement. I don't want to be thought to be saying, what can you do to improve things? I think it's a joint thing, isn't it, about how we work better together. Councillor Edwards.
I mean, this has been very informative now this morning for this committee, for those that are here. And you're saying that some of the community councils don't contribute at all. Would it not be appropriate to make some sort of brief presentation to full council, where perhaps a lot more could be more aware of the situation and enlighten them? And because I think we've all become enlightened to the work that goes on with the CAB, and I would have thought you would have captured a lot more members that could take more out into their own communities.
I'm sure that would be possible, wouldn't it, if we invited you?
Yes, indeed. I'd be more than happy to do that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that suggestion. So can we record that as a suggestion as well? Councillor Harris.
Ruth got there before me. As the county council, if you like, is putting some money into Citizens Advice, it would be rather nice for the annual report that you, I presume, are should be making to us. You can actually stand up there and tell the full council, because there are lots and lots of bits of information that we don't receive. For example, the sentence that the chair read out, £1.5 million. I mean, that's a win-win situation for the fact that the authority puts in, what is it, 57,000, and you bring back 1.5 million into the economy. It should be really trumpeted. So if we can somehow arrange for that, we should.
Thank you.
And this could also cascade, because you're reporting to members, and some members, or quite a few members, are members of community councils or town councils, so they could pass that information on along with your input. It would likely increase the amount of grant that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
It's just that you rely a great deal on volunteers anyway. And I think when people are appreciated, and it seemed to be appreciated what they do, they always work a lot better, I think, and everybody sees it as a win-win situation. And so I think if more people are aware of it, it can only benefit everybody, not just the volunteers, but the whole county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And David?
It seems to me that in the background of this, there's a lot of things which are somewhat connected towards social services, really, and I was wondering whether you had any contact with the social services side here in what you do. Is it, in the means of sort of communicating information one way and the other about where there are problems that might overlap or something that needs to be done?
We would be very happy to work with other organisations in tighter partnerships. And we already have very loose connections with a lot of these organisations, a lot of these parts of the council. But if we could tighten those relationships up and get a more direct dialogue, then that would definitely benefit our clients. Yeah.
Well, I think then that's another emerging recommendation from today. As for information currently provided, one of the things that we need to look at is whether or not there is what I could crudely call a black hole. I can think of a number of organisations who faithfully report to others who give them some support, not thinking only of our county here, faithfully report and the information sort of satisfies the terms of a grant, but actually is of much wider potential value and use. And maybe one of the things that we could be discussing is not only the need for collaboration across the piece that we've talked about, but also whether we can make a little bit of an inquiry into what happens to the information. So there are some key things emerging here. To look at the prospects for more joining up, to look at the prospects for avoiding what you might call unhelpful duplication, to look at the prospects for better dissemination of information to guide the shaping of policy. And by the way, when I say joining up, I took it in your sense, Shirley, of across services. It's not just about advice services, the advice side of things joining up. It's more general than that. And we certainly want to start to pursue some of these things. And the best place to start, I think, has been suggested, is to look at it in the context of our partnerships work in the authority. And we would also like to invite CAB, and I guess it will be through Shirley as Chief Officer, to come to Council at a suitable point to, if you like, support the annual report, which can then be made available. And then the last suggestion that I've got on my list, and tell me in a minute if I've missed things out, we really are rather keen to see even more of our community councils helping the Bureau. Is that right? Now, members in this room and of the council more widely may be able to help in that matter. So any information that can be made available about, you talked about cost per case sort of thing. That might be very specific to an individual council. We'll have to think about how that works. But the general principle is that as a county, we would be wanting to encourage our community councils who are not yet doing things to support CAB in this way. Is that a fair summary? Have I missed anything out? Councillor Jordan's hand was poised to go up. I think, have I missed something out, Paul? I think I've covered everything. So can we then draw to a conclusion? Can I thank you both, Shirley and Darren, for bringing these important matters to us. I think we've all been enlightened in various ways. And we would clearly, I think, as a committee, want to revisit some of these issues. And we may well need to ask you back to help us in that endeavour, and I'm sure that would be welcome. But I think you've given us a very clear and indeed succinct overview of some very important issues and how an important service works on it. And just a little bit of history. Those of you, Shirley was too modest to mention the origins of the movement. CAB started with the outbreak of the Second World War. It was all geared up. And originally it was about providing simple, nutritious recipes, wasn't it, in anticipation of wartime rationing. And whereas now we have websites, virtual call centres, drop-ins and everything, originally it was little more than a well-meaning, probably volunteer, behind a desk with an exercise book. So in that time, since 1939, it's blossomed into the huge endeavour that it is now, and long may it continue to thrive, I say. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just to backtrack a little question that was asked earlier. Regarding the confusion that occurs for clients between so many organisations offering advice. A classic example recently is Monmouthshire Housing Association has delivered a lot of leaflets to all of its tenants stating that when Universal Credit comes to the area, if you are on one of the following benefits, things are going to affect you. It's not actually true. Because at the moment, the only people that are going to be affected by Universal Credit are single claimants on job seekers allowance. In time, yes, if the government plan goes through, then if you are on one of the 6 combined benefits, then yes, it will affect you, but not yet. So I'm seeing an awful lot of clients turning up in dreadful states because they've been given this information and it doesn't affect them yet.
Thank you for that. We must then add Monmouthshire Housing into the list of people that we would want to involve in this. Thank you very much for that, Darren. So, thank you very much. I think we can let you leave the hot seats. Oh, sorry, Shirley.
I was just going to say, following on from Darren's comment, I actually have a meeting with Monmouthshire Housing Association next week, where hopefully we will clarify some of these issues.
I personally would be more than happy for you to say that you have been to this committee. We are clearly very, very interested in these matters because I think they're important. Okay. Can we finally let these good people go? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll talk you through all 105 pages of the report.
103 will do. We're a bit short of time.
It's okay. It is a large document. There's a lot of information. We've sent it out there just for your perusal, for some information that you might want to glean from the report. But what I'll do this morning is just draw your attention to the more salient points that are of interest to you as the adult select and the portfolio of budgets that's under your scrutiny. If I take you to firstly page 9 of the report and the recommendation point 2.1, and that's to note the net revenue outturn for the entire council of 676,000. However, when we do float these figures out, they are subject to audit. And audit have recently come back with an adjustment of 97,000 downward. So that net underspend is now reduced down to 579,000. But I think we can appreciate that's quite a significant achievement at the end of the year with all of the pressures that we've got to deliver a £579,000 underspend on the net revenue budget. But that's got to be considered with points 2.4 and 2.5. And given our current reserve position, we are looking to replenish our reserves with that underspend for future sustainability. In terms of point 2.2, the overall capital outturn is just over 500,000 underspent as well, which is another good position that we can carry forward into 16-17. If I look at how adult select and the budgets within social care performed against that outturn position. If I draw your attention to page 11, and overall for social care and health, we had a £1.283 million overspend. However, in terms of adult select, we delivered an underspend of 204,000, which I think you can agree is a fantastic achievement. Is on the backdrop of a £29 million budget that's afforded to us within adult select, which is a very good outturn position, especially when you consider that also includes mandated savings that fell to adult services of £274,000. So not only do we meet those in full, but we also deliver on top of that at 204k underspend. If I draw your attention to page 18, sorry about this, and the table in 3.110, that shows some of the major movements within the budget up and down for you to consider and ask any questions of me after I've done my presentation to you. Some of the ups and downs are also contained in page 92 of that table as well, more notably within community care, commissioning and resources that all fall under the adult select portfolio.
Thank you.
For information and noting, on page 32, is a table showing the mandated savings that I've already mentioned of £274,000, and you'll see the percentage of achievement is 100%. We achieved those in full. And if I draw your next attention to page 34, and the capital position in terms of adult, we had a revised capital budget of £323,000, and we came within £1,000 of that budget. This included a significant scheme within Mardy Park, and that was the extension of the car park that was successfully completed, and that came in within the budget that we allocated. I'm happy to take any questions as you see fit.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much indeed, Tom. Immediate questions from members, please. Councillor Jordan.
We have a very substantial payment in respect of redundancy costs. First question is, what do you anticipate the redundancy costs in the next financial year to be? And following on from that, so far as redundancy payments are concerned, are we continuing to pay enhanced redundancy as opposed to statutory redundancy? That's the first question.
In terms of redundancy, it's hard for me to answer that in terms of globally for the council. It all depends what other redesign schemes that are happening within other directorates. In terms of social care and health, we have got one significant scheme that came before Select and full council, which was the redesign at Mardy Park. That's happening this year. It was agreed that we would have caveated use of reserves to the tune of 100,000. We are trying to release savings within 16-17 to try and pay for those without using reserves. But it's just to draw your attention that if we can't meet those within revenue reserves, we do have those caveated use of reserves to fund those redundancies.
Does that answer your question or not?
Not really, because my question is, so far as this financial year is concerned, it's over £1 million we've spent in respect to redundancy payments. What do you expect to spend in 2016-17 by way of redundancy? That's the first question. And the second question is, do we continue to make enhanced redundancy payments as opposed to statutory redundancy payments?
In terms of the projections for 16-17, I'll come back to you on that if I may, because I can only talk for what's cited in terms of the portfolio that's under my control being social care and health. In terms of the actual redundancies we make, is the ready reckoner we would seek advice from HR in terms of the consultation. First of all, people go at risk. If we can't find an alternative employment within the council, then we use the ready reckoner in terms of redundancy payments they're entitled to, in terms of length of service and their current pay grade.
But if I've heard you right, There's two questions here. You're looking at the big picture, aren't you, for redundancies? But then there's the specifics within this portfolio, yeah?
Well, in terms of... sorry, answering Councillor Jones' question, I'll go back and I'll consult with Mark Outcroft in terms of what we think the calls are and the caveated use of reserves in terms of redundancies as a council as a whole, and I can come back to you on that quite quickly on that.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, Ty. Any more questions on the financing issues that we've touched on so far?
Let me just say it's
So we do need to record that, I think. We need to record, and particularly with the Chief Officer here, we need to be able to say that this is another pleasing, overall this is another pleasing report. And that means that we obviously recognise and commend the efforts of staff. There are some issues that there are still some questions about, and that's the redundancy thing, and there'll be some additional information. Yeah. But as far as our particular portfolio and the overall health of it in terms of capital and revenue as reported today, I think as a committee we are generally wanting to recognise the efforts of Claire and the various people working to her. It's particularly difficult, Claire's portfolio, I think, because some of the things, particularly in the children's area, you just cannot control. We can't control the courts. We can't control some of the fees, although efforts have been made in the past to tackle that issue. Do you want to bask in the warm glow, Claire, or say anything on this?
If I may, Chair, and thank you very much for the comments, which I'll feed back to the workforce within adult services, who need to take the credit for the performance that there's been in the adult services. In terms of that point around control, I was just looking at the demands that there had been on adult services in the last year, because we have our sort of performance indicators, and then there's numbers of people who sit beneath that. And the demands on adult services in the last year have continued to increase. So there's more people who we're supporting to discharge from hospital. There's more people who are contacting us. We know the demographic challenges that we face in Monmouthshire. So the journey which adult services in Monmouthshire has been on over the last 5 years to really transform the way that we provide care and support for people in a way which is proportionate, in a way which reflects what matters to them, and a way which they get to live the lives that they want to live, but without intensive service input if it's not needed, needs to be absolutely credited and continue to recognise this is a journey which has been started on a long while ago and continues to progress. Obviously, this is not about scrutiny about where we are this year, but just to remind members that there's a significant budget mandate around practice change and continuing to make those improvements in the way that we practice, which results in us being able to achieve savings. And that's going to be increasingly challenging for us to achieve given those demographics and the demand on our service. But I think it's right and proper that we reflect on the performance that there was last year.
Just a small matter. Looking at the schedule of overspends and underspends, if we look in, I'm just concentrating on adult services now, we've got a payment, an overspend of, I think it's £111,000 in respect of council's fees, in respect of legal proceedings. Some considerable time ago, I remember discussing with some officers the possibility of agreeing fixed term or fixed price arrangements with council, because I'm aware that Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Berkshire all have arrangements with council's chambers for fixed fees in respect of care cases. I'm not sure if that's ever been taken up by this authority.
I can certainly recall you mentioning that more than once in various fora, but we just don't know, do we? Ty, Claire?
I can sort of come back on. I remember you mentioned that to the previous head of service. I think it was when Tracy Giles recently took over the job. So I remember you raising that. I'm sure from my recollection, I'm sure Tracy did come back to you on that at a later date, but I can certainly check that and feed that back to you. But I'm sure she did explore that option. And I'm sure at the later CYP select, she did actually come back, but I'll certainly check that and come back to you.
The reason why I inquire is because we are clearly spending significant amounts of money on council's fees. It is often, in fact, cheaper to instruct council in respect of childcare and other matters than instructing solicitors because their hourly rate is less. And from having seen the figures from very senior family chambers in Oxford, the amount of remuneration that council receive on fixed term arrangements is significantly smaller or less than on an ad hoc basis. I'm just suggesting there may be significant savings if you look at it.
And that would require setting up a sort of almost sort of call-off contract, would it?
The first thing an officer needs to do is just to speak to legal services in Berkshire or Oxfordshire or Buckinghamshire to see how they manage it, because they're going to have the same problems there as we have here.
I can remember the question you asked because it was in context as well as whether there's other capacity as well from neighbouring authorities. So I'm sure that Tracy did engage with Newport as well. But I'll double check on what was relayed back, and I'll come back on that. Thanks.
Councillor Jordan.
In terms of giving us direction, we appreciate all of the direction you can give us because we do take it on board. And it's a collective approach. We really do appreciate your comments coming back, Councillor. Really do, and I'll follow those through. Thanks.
Thank you. And Claire, I think, has indicated certainly by body language, we've got a fresh opportunity to look at this. New people in place, different perspective, and it would be, I think, salutary to pursue this. It arose partly in the context of children and young people, but it's not only about that. It's a general thing where we need to employ counsel, and Councillor Jordan has sufficient lack of any self-interest to want us to spend as little as possible on my learned friends, and we appreciate that. Right. Any more questions for Ty on this? Are we then satisfied with the report that we have received? We've expressed our recognition and appreciation of the efforts of staff to get us to this point. There are one or two questions that will be pursued after the meeting where Ty's offered to get information, particularly to Councillor Jordan in response to his questions. And then there's the general point that we hope that an opportunity can be taken to look again at whether we can do more to learn from other authorities in the matter of some of the legal costs. Is that a fair summary? In which case, thank you very much indeed once again. Thank you, Ty. I think this item, Claire, was for most likely for you to give a little bit of feedback from the members' seminars that we had the other week, and to help us see what might be the way forward. And then in turn, committee can think about how it's going to be able to work in that context. I can't remember, if you'll forgive me, members, how many of you were present for the presentations on dementia-friendly communities and Buenauer. Most of us probably were, but I was. So it might be, it would be worth a few minutes. I think you were. Sorry, Claire, I don't want you to have to replay the seminars, but people just need to be reminded of the issues and then how we can help going forward. If you could do that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago, on the 7th of June, we held a member seminar which covered two very significant topics. The first, we received a presentation from Bobby Bolt, who's the Assistant Director within an Iron Bevan Health Board, and that was around Bwy Nawr, which I struggled to say correctly throughout the entire seminar, but the content was very, very powerful, really, because it looked at how we as a society, how we as individuals, how we as communities and families, and how we as services, and it really did cover all of those levels, recognise that death is a fact of life, and then have those conversations that all of us sometimes struggle to have with the people who are nearest and dearest to us about what our wishes are, and then get on with living our lives. That was the big message from it, but there was a far more sort of sophisticated, I suppose, presentation to look at what that means at every level. It does mean that from a service point of view, when we get into health and social care services, that our workforce are prepared for having those conversations with people. We know that our integrated teams who largely deal with people who are frail and older and frequently towards end of life have done a lot to remodel the way that they work with people to understand what matters, and that can be what matters really in end stages, and what does a good day look like, even if it's in the last days and weeks of life, is something which they're becoming very, very skilled at supporting people and families around that. But, you know, it was far broader than that around, you know, as individuals, families and communities, how we sort of take on board that message. A number of members, I think, expressed the view that they had no intention of dying, but nonetheless, it is something we all need to be thinking of in a very sensitive, sensible way. So that was the first part of the seminar. The second part of the seminar then was a presentation and really a training session from Phil Diamond, who is a colleague from the Regional Transformation Team who supports us across the authorities and Health Board in implementing the Social Services and Wellbeing Act around dementia-friendly communities. And he, in a very succinct half-an-hour session, really set out some clear sort of facts for us around dementia. And again, it wasn't about how we as sort of services align ourselves to support people with dementia and their families. A lot's been done around that. It was more around how we as individuals and within communities and businesses within communities and sort of everybody who sort of lives out there sort of recognise what dementia is, recognise that if there is somebody who is out and about but clearly, you know, appears to be suffering with dementia, how we ourselves are able just to be sensitive around that. And I think that was, again, very powerfully delivered, and everybody took away their little dementia-friendly badges and sort of probably then reflected on sort of, you know, their own experiences, it being a shop, a post office, or their local community, how they would perhaps be a bit different from here on. And obviously there were a lot of personal stories around that as well. I think in terms of where we go from that, I then had some conversations sort of straight afterwards with Will McLean, because we've got our Ageing Well partnership here in Monmouthshire, and we wanted to make sure that we're not just at a high level saying, yes, this is really important, that we put some really practical next steps against both of these priority areas. So that Ageing Well partnership we'll be looking at sort of action plans for us. Again, you know, it's very clearly far wider than social services and health. So with the Dementia Friendly, it's really a rolling programme of you know, that awareness raising and just very brief training for our front-facing workforce initially, and then thinking how far that needs to go. With the Boy Now, again, it's around that awareness training and sensitivity around these issues, and that partnership would be taking that forward. There's an intention that the council meeting on the 28th of July would formally, as a council, endorse these two very important and significant initiatives. And I think we would be the first council to be formally part of these partnerships. Individual towns have sort of endorsed themselves as dementia-friendly towns or communities, but you know, as a council, I think that would be a significant step for us. And I think where we wanted perhaps some further discussion this morning is the role of Select then in how we continue as a Select committee to play a role in these initiatives.
Claire, thank you. That's very clear, and particularly Boy Now has started here almost with, if you remember, a question from a member way back, and we've come some way since then. So clearly, presentation at council is going to be the next sort of public step. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of infrastructure that you envisage? Because it clearly won't happen on its own, will it? Either of them?
No, I think this is you know, taking these very important sort of high level. This is the way we want to work, and making it practical on the ground for people is the challenge really. And I think it provides some real focus for the partnership group, which sits beneath our public service board arrangements around Ageing Well, that there will be action plans and partnership action plans which sit and are owned and driven through that existing group. You know, for me, it very much aligns with the work that we're trying to take forward around the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act, which is with its focus on well-being, intervening early, preventing, and for me, that's really about skilling up people outside of social services to mean that we only do what we really need to do. And so I see that group as a key driver and lever, and there are a number of partners in that group. And I know that Phil went to a meeting there, I think, last week, and that was well received.
So, members, how would you like us to continue to be involved in this? Should we be, for example, the focal point for periodic progress reports? Should we be asking people to tell us how things are going, whether there's any sticking points? Clearly we don't have a kind of management role, but we do have an encouraging and supporting role, and by asking the right questions from time to time, we can also deliver that sort of support. Councillor Harris, did you?
I was just thinking, Chair, I mean, what we need to do from members is ask why a great proportion of them never come along to these things. I always think it's sad. You know, they're put on, and you know, it must reflect back down the authority that the members can't be bothered.
Chair, sorry.
Mr. Jordan.
Could I suggest that perhaps once every month or 6 weeks we actually have a day of presentations and just group them in one day? So rather than bits and pieces?
So we would be talking about a regular programme, but the point is you wouldn't come, as a member, you wouldn't be having to consider coming in for a single item. It would be a programme almost like a day course almost, which would be updating you on a number of things. And many of those will be, as it happens, not directly relevant to the work of this committee, but this committee could be supporting that suggestion. I mean, for the avoidance of doubt, we're not suggesting, Claire, a monthly seminar to update us. But it's a way of us all supporting the work. And then, you know, any more detailed things on a less frequent basis could.
No, I think it's important for members to be aware of what is going on outside their particular field of committees, to get a broader understanding of what's happening within the authority. And I mean, there are 101 different types of seminars you can have, right? You know, if everybody allocated a day a month, and you had, say, 5 or 6 seminars with lunch in between, might encourage them to come.
It hasn't made any difference I mean, sometimes we've had 4 people here and for a seminar, so I really don't think, but I do think it's a good idea, perhaps not monthly, that seems a little over the top for 5 or 6 seminars, because the officers themselves would be overstretched, but it would be good. But we'd have to go through democratic services and have it diarised, because it really must be put in the diary at a specific date. And perhaps we could put that suggestion forward, maybe too late for this diary, and we may have to do it ad hoc now. But for next year, could we please have a seminar day added to our diary when nothing else is put in? Because the point is that we have special meetings and lots of meetings, and we come to the seminar and they're finding it very difficult to slot it into our diaries. So can we please contact Democratic Services for perhaps future reference that we have a seminar day?
So we're halfway there.
Carry on. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That was really helpful. Maybe we also need to, those of us who are involved with it, need to pursue this through the coordinating board as well. If we could agree to do that, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. In terms of the 2 specific examples that Claire has described to us this morning, we might want to identify a notional period of time when we would want to hear about progress. I suspect probably not much this side of Christmas. This side of Christmas, but closer to Christmas than, yeah. So hopefully, say November time, we'd like to hear a bit more progress. I'm also conscious that once we get past Christmas, we're going to be in the final furlongs of this particular council's run. And it's going to be important, I think, that some pieces of work that have been started and need to continue don't drop off the radar. And that's, I think, to my mind, part of this. Councillor Harris is pointing to me 8th of September, seminar afternoon, right, it's all there.
Actually diarised.
Okay, but no content yet arrived at. So we'll do a pincer movement.
It's just the morning. There's the morning before that. There's an odd morning and an odd afternoon. But what we're saying is that there could be a day, a specific day every 6 weeks or something put aside.
Yes.
So if it went along with Councillor Jordan's idea.
Okay, have we? Right. So are we happy with that then? So we'll aim for. Now, would it be for you to come back on this, Claire, or you and others?
Yeah, I think myself and others, and I think if we can keep taking that multi-agency approach around this, then that really reflects the way that we need to work around these areas. And I should have said, I will say now, I think it really is thanks to this committee that we've got the focus now within the council, which is needed on these areas. So that's been incredibly helpful, I think, in moving this agenda forward.
We touched on this briefly in the pre-meeting, but there are 1 or 2 things that are coming up that we might want to be able to take into scrutiny. Now, one idea that's floating around, but I may have got this completely wrong, is something to do with Usk Prison. I don't think I have, and it's a question of whether we could understand what is being suggested and then try and find a workable way of doing it.
One of the new duties we've had as a local authority since April this year with the new Social Services and Wellbeing Act is a duty to provide all the same care and support and statutory duties we have around social services and wellbeing to our prison population. We're obviously one of only a small number of authorities in Wales where there are prisons. We are required to report back to Welsh Government on our performance in respect of these duties. We've had a specific allocation of resource from Welsh Government to support us in carrying out these duties, and there's been a working group with colleagues from the prison, colleagues from health, because there's already a health prison service, which has developed the way that we will and are now taking this forward in Monmouthshire. So we thought probably in the autumn, when we've had a good 6-month run into this, it would be good to have some in-depth scrutiny, and the suggestion has been mooted that we could actually do that within the prison of how we are fulfilling in terms of our duties. We're in dialogue with colleagues from the prison service about them being part of that scrutiny arrangement as well.
Right. Now, that's the idea. I may have misrepresented it slightly. The question would be how we did it. Councillor Jordan, you've got some thoughts about this, haven't you? How?
I'm just thinking, how do you actually scrutinise it? And how are we going to go along there and scrutinise what the prison authority is doing? We're not.
You would be scrutinising what we're doing as a local authority because we've got new statutory duties that you need to be aware that we are required to provide the full range of social care offer into prison. So things like making sure that we've got domiciliary care services, people who work for us as home carers, and now going into prisons and delivering care and support to people within that prison setting. So it's quite a significant new responsibility we've got. It didn't exist before. So you'd be scrutinising us, but our way of delivering that is obviously to work in partnership, that this is not something we can do on our own, that we've had to really work with our partners in the prison service, our partners in the health service who were already providing prison health service to look at how we implement this new set of duties. But it's something which is quite new for us to be working in this way, so you'd be scrutinising us.
Yes, Chair, thanks. I would be, I have worked at the prison for some time in the past. I would be happier, due to the public input and the public scrutiny of our meetings, if we went there on a visit and then had a presentation including prison officers and the prison service here. I would feel far happier doing it that way. But certainly I'd like an in-depth visit first. I don't see the point of having a meeting there, to be honest.
Does that sound feasible?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we would do a visit. Yeah. So instead of having, as I might have suggested earlier, instead of having our meeting there, we would make a visit. And it would set the scene for us subsequently then to receive a presentation, and it would be a multi-agency presentation. Are people content with that? It keeps the scrutiny role open and public, but in this case with new work, it gives us an opportunity to start to get our heads around it on site, which is often much more useful than through paper. David?
It obviously adds quite a significant quantity of people onto the responsibility, doesn't it? I think I saw a figure of about 400 or something extra people. Is that right, that you've now got responsibility for?
No, I think in common with the rest of the population, there will be lots of prisoners who won't have a requirement for social services. There will be a small number of prisoners who will, and who we've got that responsibility now around care and support. That wider offer around information, advice and assistance is there then for everybody, but it's linking with what's already available. So it's not a new thing in that sense, that we would be looking to provide information and advice which is over and above what they're already getting. It's making sure that we are confident that our duties are being provided for in that way. But there is a small proportion of that prison population who would require that direct social services input.
Thank you. Morning, Claire. I'm just wondering, where do we stand with the establishments? And we've got several in the county, but specifically the North Court and Tullocker and those sorts of places that are reasonably secure. I just wonder where they fall into our categories of being statutory,
Where we've got private hospitals, in a sense, which may or may not be secure, they come regulatorily under the Health Inspectorate Wales, and then in clinical governance terms, they would have their own sort of arrangements within. They wouldn't be our responsibility as a social services authority. So
It's direct from the centre. We're not involved, but they're on the patch. That's the yeah.
I'm just going to say, presumably, if we're going to go to West Prison, we'll want the opportunity to actually speak to prisoners. Otherwise, it's a one-sided story, isn't it?
I think we need to look very carefully about how we plan this. So I think this is a very helpful discussion, because what I will take away from this is some further discussions with colleagues, Bernard particularly, Bernard Boniface, who's led this part of ACT implementation for us and is responsible on the ground for delivering this part of what we do, and colleagues within the prison service, to make sure that we're planning this in a way which is sensible, and means that you get what you need out of that visit to the prison to enable you to scrutinise us, really.
Yes, I just wonder if we're responsible for the social care and health of prisoners from outside the county. I just assume we would be, but can you confirm that?
Yes, when they're in the secure estate within Monmouthshire, we are. So similarly, if we've got Monmouthshire residents who are in secure estate elsewhere in Wales, yes, that authority would be. There's a difference in terms of children. We remain responsible for children who are in secure accommodation, wherever that may be across the UK. We remain responsible, but adults who are in our secure estate, we're responsible for.
Okay, so everybody happy with this one then? So we've said yes in principle to a visit to Usk Prison. The actual scope of the visit, Claire can now work on with Bernard Boniface and others, if as necessary, and come back to us with some sort of a possible programme. And then we would wish to link this visit to a meeting of the committee at which we do a scrutiny exercise, as it were, informed by our previous visit. So again, the timing will have to be managed. So, obviously we're going to want the visit and then the scrutiny committee. So again, we're looking at a meeting towards the end of the year or early next, depending on what's possible. I don't think we can say much more than that at this stage. But thank you for that. And it's a very interesting idea, for which we thank you and I guess Bernard as well. Yeah. While you're here then, were there any other issues that members wanted to consider as possible components in our scrutiny going forward? I'll then repeat the request that I've had from a fellow councillor, that we might want to look at stroke and the support for people who've had strokes, and along the way to include ways in which we do or do not support the likes of the Stroke Association and so on and so forth. Does that strike members as being something that you would like us to pursue? I don't think we can go into much more detail at the moment than saying that's a topic that, and I'll need to get a better briefing from the councillor concerned about what exactly his point was. But you could imagine a session where we could invite the likes of the Stroke Association. We could remind ourselves also of the good work that's being done through leisure services to help people recover. Is that a suitable topic, David?
I mean, it seems to me that fits pretty well into the sort of work that's going on sort of integrated services into the community and things, doesn't it? And I wouldn't be surprised if there's not some degree of connection going on there somewhere, perhaps already.
It's when you get asked something, why don't you look at? Initially, you're at the mercy of the intelligence gathering of the person who's asking the question. For all I know, the whole thing might already be fully worked out, fully articulated, etc., etc., etc. But I'm conscious that if a member raises with us an issue that they have an interest in and would like to see us look at, we need to make a response. I'm conscious that over time, Councillor Smith has made other suggestions and I've studiously ignored them.
Say, Chairman.
Then we go to Councillor Edwards, please.
Is it permissible for me to speak? Thank you very much. That it would also be interesting when you're useful to look at the work that's been going on within our Bevan Health Trust, or whatever they're called, the way their services are evolving.
And again, being rude to Councillor Edwards, we do have our annual fixture now with the Health Board, and we need to start to build the list for that as well. I call it an annual fixture. We do need to follow up some things that have not actually been done, as well as things that we might want to know about. So thank you for that. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you there, Chair. Some people have met people with stroke, some haven't, or it doesn't cross their radar at all in their lives. But there's such a variation in the disability that occurs after a stroke. And my own father had a stroke over 20 years ago, and he was very, very debilitating. But some sort of have these mini strokes. So there's a big variation, and then a big variation of what follow-up and needs that they have, and which part of the county they were living in at that time. I mean, my father, as you know, was a farmer living, as they say, out in the sticks, and the help was very, very difficult to get. And so it's a different perspective on if someone gets a heart attack and so on. But when it comes to stroke, there is a very different need for all those that are individual after a stroke, with their mobility and speech and all sorts of things. So it's quite a big issue when it comes to what support they would require after they've had a stroke. Thank you.
I can recall, not that long ago, having a very interesting presentation about strokes and the treatment of strokes in Monmouthshire and North and South, and the roles of the Gwent and the roles of the Neville Hall, and it was very reassuring. So we have addressed this issue to some extent, but we may need to enlarge upon it. But it was very interesting.
But also something about what happens afterwards, particularly bearing in mind the nature of the county.
Because it's a very broad pathway around stroke services, from sort of prevention to what happens and where you get treated during that acute phase in the rehabilitation. So given there's been that focus about stroke services and treatment, maybe a focus on life after stroke, which can be very different and that would really bring in the Stroke Association and relationship with them as well.
That gives us our theme, does it not? Is that all right?
Yes.
We've got that. Right, excellent, thank you. Now, thumbing through frantically to the work programme. Are we happy with that? No more bids? Excellent. we just then need to remind ourselves what our current work programme is. We don't have Hazel here to remind us, but if we just have a quick look to see where we're going. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. So first item was the meeting yesterday. Well, we'll say no more about that. Meeting today. Now, the housing solutions we've postponed from today. That will need to come to an early next meeting. We've got 12th of July, the domiciliary care report from CSSIW. And then there are some other things to be factored in, including some of our old friends like Gwyses. The thought of doing a year on the committee without looking at Gwyses is almost unimaginable. So presumably we will be looking to fit the Housing Solutions report possibly into... Anyway, we'll negotiate that with Hazel, but it could be as soon as July, depending on how the other one is looking. But other than that, we've got a number of dates in hand, and we can start to flesh the programme about. There are some things that I will be pursuing actually after this meeting that come from previous meetings. If you remember, when we had I think it was the carers meeting, the question has arisen about the overall effort. It seems to me to be my theme for the year, looking across Monmouthshire to see if we can even up some of the gaps and differences and so on. And one of the things that we were asking about was what had happened to this particular group or that particular area of work. What was the role of the older people's champion in the authority, and who was that? Well, I'm beginning to I had a very helpful reply to my letter from Councillor Burrows, and so I'll be starting some conversations with individual officers who might be able to help us to understand where things are, and we will report back and hopefully be able to bring them before you at a future point. But we've certainly, I had a helpful reply to my letter from the Cabinet member about a number of questions where we were fairly sure that we didn't know as much as we would like to know about what was going on. So I'm not in a position to bring anything substantial back yet, but it is in hand. So, does that conclude our discussion of our work programme? So from today's meeting, we've got some very clear thoughts and recommendations about citizens' advice. I don't think I need to go through those again, do I? No. Everybody seemed very happy with those. As far as our finance report is concerned, we've had our say on that, and we're going to ask, Claire has already undertaken to convey our complimentary remarks to the team, and we thank you for doing that. We've looked at some areas for new inquiry, and those in particular will be the question of work in prison and life after stroke, we've called it, which I rather like the title for that. I think we would want to keep that. And then we've also discussed with Claire the follow-up of those 2 members' seminars, and that will initially happen in full council at the end of July, and then we'll be coming back to scrutiny with the partnership people at some point around November, we thought. And I think that is just, there's something else on the tip of my tongue that I thought I needed to mention, but maybe I've covered it. Oh yes, we're going to press the point in coordinating board about the potential for members' seminars eventually on a day basis, certainly more than just periodic one-offs. And that, I think, was something that we can readily undertake to do. I think we're there, aren't we?
Yep.
So if you just appeal to my compulsions and obsessions by sitting for 2 minutes till it says 12 o'clock, so that I can say the meeting closed at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you, as always, for your questions and your contributions. And thank you, Claire, for staying and helping us with a number of issues along the way. Thank you very much indeed. Yes.